Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the September webinar as part of the Star Business Solutions webinar series for Greentree. Today we'll be covering off on various aspects of the finance module and functionality. With me today I have Josh Diffie, and for those of you who may notice, Josh has a new business title now. I think we mentioned it last time, but he's now been promoted to be General Manager of Sales for Star Business Solutions. Just a couple of housekeeping things to start with. We will be having a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, so please hold your questions until then. However, if you want to type them in as you go, when we get to the end, we will be able to bring up all of the questions that you've asked and go through them as efficiently as we can. A copy of the webinar will be emailed to everyone who's attending sometime within the next 24 hours. If you're interested in copies of old webinars, they can be found on our website. If you go to our website, look under the Insights section, and you can actually filter by webinars, and all of the old webinars are there. Alternatively, you can go to the Star Business Solutions YouTube channel, where we will have all of the old webinars, and this one will go up probably within the next week as well. At the end of the webinar, if you have any suggestions for other topics for webinars, please email them to myself, norman.hall@star.cd. And we'd also be interested in finding out whether or not everyone's happy with having bi-monthly webinars, or if you'd like to see them a little bit more regularly, or a little bit less regularly if you're sick of hearing my voice. Anyway, I'll hand over to Josh, who will take over today's presentation.
Thanks, Norman. So today we'll be going through a number of key financial options. So some of those will be straight out of the what I'd say core finance module. So GL being the main focus of today, and that's being GL allocations, as well as some of the reporting options we'll be getting to. We'll also be going through a couple of additional modules that are either modules in their own right or come as functionality of other modules. So GL validations is one of those, which if you have the workflow approvals and alerts module, which quite a large number of our clients have, that's a module or a function that you have available to you. Alternatively, if you have the quad accounting module, that also becomes available. GL reconciliations is a module in its own right, and we'll be going through some of the key features available there. We'll then be going through some of the financial reporting options, of which there are a number, and trying to cover them in a nice level of detail to give you all a bit of a flavour of what reporting options you've got with the standard suite of Greentree modules, through to more specific modules around BI and potentially web-based reporting. And as Norman said, we'll open up to question and answers. So let's jump on in. So we're going to start with GL allocations. So GL allocations is a standard feature of the General Ledger module. And what it allows you to do is keep track of, I'd say, standard splits or allocations of costs, usually across profit center within the GL or branch. And we'll jump through a couple of examples to hopefully show that in its fullest. The allocations maintenance screen is fairly basic. What you have is the initial GL account that transactions will be posted to. Depending on how you have this set up, this normally would be effectively a clearing account. You'd actually expecting that account to always end up zero, but there are options around that also. And so what I've got here is I've got a GL account I've labeled insurance distribution. And then I've set this as what we call a percentage allocation. So whenever a transaction occurs to that GL account, whether that be a GL journal or whether that be on a financial transaction such as accounts payable invoices, which this example will be used for, it's going to split the amount in a percentage base, saying the first 40% is going to branch 10, the next 30% is going to branch 20, and the residual or 30% is going to branch 30. So this is great where you have especially overhead type costs, so things like power, gas, phone bills, insurance in this example, where you have a fairly set allocation of how you split those costs. Now that allocation may still change or as your business grows or adapts. Each time a transaction hits that allocation account, it will check what the allocation setup is. So it won't retrospectively go back and change old transactions, of course. So if you do change that from a 40-30-30 to more a 40-20-40 or something like that, then you can update that as time goes on. So let's jump on in and do a supplier invoice. I'm not going to spend too much time on how supplier invoices work because there's a good chance that most of the people in this webinar are already familiar with the process. But one of the key things I will point out that I've used to make the data entry process a lot easier for today's demonstration, and you can of course use this for your setup of Greentree. So this insurance company I've got it that I would normally or always be posting to that insurance distribution account. So on that supplier, if I simply drill down and have a quick look, I've set their default expense account as that insurance distribution general ledger account. So when I'm doing my data entry, I don't have to remember which account to use. I can simply come in and say this transaction was for $1,000, and let's just go with test allocation for the invoice number there. So I come in, hit save, and if I go have a look at the postings that have occurred there, if I have a look at my batch edit list here, we're going to focus on the top section to begin with, and I'll explain the bottom section in a bit. So I've had the full $909, so that was an inclusive GST amount. I go to my insurance distribution. It's then come out of that account and posted to my allocation accounts. So I've got my bulk of that 40% going to an allocation. You'll notice that it puts a narration against that transaction to say why it's posting there. So when I am looking at this in a GL or financial transaction list, I will get a clear understanding of why that's been allocated out. Now, if you do have the quad accounting module, which in this example I have turned on, the branches or that first segment in the chart of accounts is being treated as a separate entity. So you'll notice that because those transactions or those accounts were different from the branch that was on the transaction, I've got some intercompany loan accounts being created. So not only will this do the allocations for you, but if you do have that quad accounting module, it'll also then fire off those intercompany loan transactions. So from one supplier invoice for one line of the full amount, that's then split that out across the appropriate entities in my example, as well as creating those loan transactions as we go. Now you can use that allocation maintenance, as I said, for as many different accounts as you'd like. I've used the insurance as one example, but as I said, power is another common scenario. Now, of course, you can have multiple allocations for the same type of cost, but there is only one allocation per initial general ledger account. So in that example, if you did have a power bill, for example, that needed to be split across maybe 2 or 3 of your entities or branches, and another power bill for another office needs to get split separately, then in that example, you would have 2 separate initial GL allocation accounts. But the actual split can have, as I said, whatever accounts you would like to put in there. So this GL allocations, it is a fairly simplistic function within the general ledger module to set up and use, but one that's quite often overlooked in the early stages of an implementation and going forward. The other area from a GL perspective that I'd like to jump into is the GL validations function, which is available, as I said earlier, if you have either the quad accounting module turned on or you have approvals and alerts turned on. Either way, those become available. So basically what we have set up there, so you may have noticed that I had 3 different branches that transaction was against. For those that were paying attention, that was Melbourne, Sydney, and Brisbane. And in this example, what I'm going to do is show you how easy it is to update your chart of accounts if you, for example, create a new branch or profit center or any other combination of GL accounts that need to be created en masse. So let's go ahead and create a new branch. I'm going to call this, let's go to Adelaide. So I'm going to call this my Adelaide branch, and I'm going to select 40, which is a non-existent segment in my chart of accounts at the moment, but I'm going to select 40 there against my branch. My next step is to do what we call defining segments. So you can access this either through the System General Ledger modules or through Workflow Approvals and Alerts. But let's just jump through my favorites here. So each of the segments within the your chart of accounts, in my demonstration system, that's 3, but your system might be 2, it might be 4, it could be any number of segments there. So I'm obviously adding a new branch, but this concept could be applied to any one of the segments within your chart of accounts, including potentially adding natural accounts en masse as well. So let's go turn on that segment. So what we have is on the left-hand side what you want that segment to be. So that would be the number of characters that segment is. So in this example, it's 2 alphanumeric characters. We're just going to type in 40. If you have multiple companies within Greentree and you're using the segments within the chart of accounts, the same code across entities to mean different things, like in my demonstration system, 30 in company 01 is Melbourne, but 30 in company 2 is Halifax, then you can select the company code. I'm more of the mindset that the same code should apply across the board, so I would normally just use that default option, but you can select company that relates to if appropriate. So let's come in here and select Adelaide. Initially, that's all I'm going to set up for the moment. You can do some things like default assigned teams and a few other along the way, probably a little less relevant at this top level segment. Let's go ahead and save that. So defined our segment. Now, what are we actually going to do to use it? Well, we have what we call validation matrix or validation matrices, depending on how you want to go about it. You have as many of these as you'd like. And as you can see by this matrix type on the right-hand side, you can use these to either be what we call an inclusion matrix, which means these are accounts that will be created, or in a slightly rarer scenario, you can say exclusion, where it can be the accounts that you don't want to create. And that will make a little bit more sense as we step through the process. So let's just call this Adelaide. And for today's demonstration, I'm just going to do it for that first company, but you can do this en masse. Which branch it relates to. So you'll notice that the first tab was my company. The next, however many of tabs you've got on your system. In my example, as I said, 3 segments. They're showing across there. If you only have 2, you'll only see 2 tabs to the right of company. So I only want to do this matrix for the new segment, which is 40. What departments do they have? They may not have all the departments. They may only have department 10 and 20, whatever those refer to in your organization. And then which accounts you wish to use. Now, they may not be selling any software, for example, so maybe I can turn off the software cost of goods sold and the software income, or tick on certain ones, tick off certain ones. You can do that by type very quickly, if need be, but let's just leave it at that for the moment. You can quickly see what accounts that's going to generate in a nice quick extract. So these are all the account combinations that it will potentially create in the future steps. Now, I would anticipate that if you were to go down this path, you would most likely have a validation matrix per branch if those branches have different combinations of accounts, but depends, as I said, once again, on how you set up your organization. You might decide you want to do it by cost center because regardless of where the branch may be, the same cost center or department has the same set of accounts. You can play around with this module to really fit or meet your specific general ledger requirements. So that was quite a few accounts that it was suggesting it was going to create. So let's come in and go to that next step, which is what we call generate chart. Now there is a number of steps that can be used across here. One is we can simply check our existing chart of accounts to see what meets or doesn't meet our set of matrices. And that's where you might use that exclusion list, as I was saying before, to potentially determine what it is that needs to be checked. Now, by default, the display only no update is selected. So anything I'm playing around with at this stage is just doing that. You'll notice that, for example, in the check existing chart of accounts, I can set the exceptions to inactive. So if, which I'll be doing in potentially a second section of this demonstration. But what we'll focus on at the moment is this generating chart of accounts. So I can either hit add or update. So if I've gone in and changed account descriptions and what trees they're assigned to and so on within that defined segments, then this update option will go through and potentially rename account names, descriptions, and so on where appropriate. Let's just hit add for the moment. And so I would normally suggest the process is quite quick and efficient. So I'd probably hit that display only, no update pretty much every time, just to be safe, to make sure it's doing exactly what I want to do before I go too far down the rabbit hole. So if I hit process, has a quick little run through and says, hey, this is what I was going to do. So if I come in and have a look at that and scroll to the very top, it says, sorry, I'm about to add this account to company 01, and I'm also going to add it to the following tree or tree branches. So a quick, easy process to see, yep, that's what I'm after. I can export that if required. So let's just go and create those accounts. That's going to go through, create all those general ledger accounts for me. They're all going to meet the specific setup requirements that I've already put in place. So we're not going to have a situation where one account number has a different name to the same account number in a separate branch or cost center. We get the same naming convention across the board. And if I was to go now have a look at my general ledger account screen and go have a look at segment 40, I've now got all those accounts. And you'll notice that that software income was not included. Now let's say our business model changes and our Adelaide branch is now no longer selling hardware, but they are selling software. Okay, so I can come into my validation matrix down the track and I can say, yep, we're now going to include that one and exclude the hardware, and include that one and exclude the hardware. So I'm updating that across, in this example, one branch, but potentially you might be looking at turning that off across the board or turning it on across the board. If I go back to my generate chart, this would be a two-step process. It would be one, adding the new accounts. So same process I went through before. If I just go through and hit add, that's gone and added those new accounts. And if I go and have select that check existing chart of accounts, and once again, we'll hit display only, especially for this step, and hit process. That's gone through and found every GL account in my entire system currently that don't meet my criteria. Now, the very first time you turn this on, if you're not using it from the get-go, there's a good chance you're going to have quite a few showing up that, hey, we're going to set that as inactive, because of course I had only one matrix for that new branch I set up. So that's a fairly impractical way of generating the chart or updating it straight off the bat. It's also a prime reason why I strongly recommend hitting that display only for when we hit that process button. But we can come in and run this process just for the one company, if need be. And at that point, when I run that process, it would then include only those ones. Now, you can hit the set exceptions to inactive. So any account it finds that doesn't meet your matrix requirements, it can set it as inactive. And you'll notice this delete exceptions. Now, those that are familiar with the Greentree delete options within master files, assuming you have access to delete records that have never been used, so master files that have never been used, can be deleted. So if I set up some GL accounts en masse, like I just did then, and someone says, oh, you shouldn't have selected department 30, I can delete them en masse. Once again, though, if I accidentally include one that has transactions against it, never fear, I can't delete a GL account that has been used. So it'll just say set inactive when transactions exist. If I don't have that ticked, it simply will skip over that GL account. So yes, a nice, quick and easy way of creating or setting inactive or potentially even deleting GL accounts en masse as your company structure changes and evolves. Now, if you're doing this on implementation, it's a great way of setting up your chart of accounts. If you are already existing Greentree users, it is something that you can still implement after the fact. It might take a little bit just to make sure that you've got your existing structure set up correctly, but not really any different than if you would have to do it from the get-go regardless. So that is the GL validations module, or feature, I should say. It's not a module in itself. So the next step I wanted to go into was GL account reconciliations. So this is a module in itself. What this allows you to do is have a reconciliation process on usually clearing type GL accounts, but that's of your call. So I see this used for accounts such as a purchase order clearing or accrual account. That's a fairly common one it might be used on. Maybe a work in progress type account, or potentially even control accounts, if that's a level you'd like to go to as well. So for starters, a general ledger account needs to have it ticked. So if I was just to look at my, let's go with my purchase order clearing account, you have to have the allow reconciliations tick box ticked to, funnily enough, allow reconciliations. And then we have a couple of options about how we're going to reconcile transactions. Now I can have a look at the specific accounts that I have this turned on. So I've got the insurance distribution account, which I had before, turned on, just as an example to show that we'll always balance to zero, but also 3 of my purchase order clearing accounts set up here. So let's go have a look at one of those. Now you can either manually reconcile transactions. If I was just to open that date up and hit apply, this is going to show me all the transactions within my date range that are currently sitting within that general ledger account. So most of it, as you can see, is purchase order receipts, which should be realistically the bulk of the transactions, if not all of the transactions that are sitting in that account. But being a demonstration system, we've got some GL journals in there as well. So as supplier invoices occur, and this is a drill down screen. So if I look at that purchase order receipt and I double click, I can see there's my receipt. If I was just to, for example, create the invoice, I'll just use today's date as the example. when I hit apply, you'll see that that's showing in my in May 2016, and of course the invoice finally came in a number of years later to finally charge us for the goods that we had received. Now, there are a couple of modules that we can automatically reconcile for you, and purchase order clearing, which is probably the most commonly used account for this GL allocations, reconciliations module, is one of those. So I can come in here and hit automatically reconcile the purchase order clearing account. When I hit that reconcile button, that's going to go through and find the transactions that are that meet that criteria. So if I come back in and hit apply, you'll notice that $250 receipt is no longer showing up, and the $250 supplier invoice is also no longer showing up. So these are effectively showing me the specific transactions that are still sitting in these clearing accounts. As I said, you might decide you want to use that for an AP or accounts receivable control account to see not only what transactions might be outstanding, but also, well, not how much is outstanding, but also which specific transactions may still be sitting in there. Now, there are a number of different reports on that, but it's a good way of managing that process. The next step I wanted to go into was from more of a reporting standpoint, because there are just so many different ways you can report on finance within the Greentree system. I thought I'd step you through a number of out-of-the-box options with standard features and functions, and then step through additional modules that are a little bit more focused down specific areas and talk about where they may apply. They won't apply to every organization, and that's why there's options. So one of the most common options we see is our Excel add-in. So if I just open up Excel, and it's just, as I said, standard Excel within Windows. Under my add-ins menu, you'll see a Greentree menu option. Now, I'd go as far as saying the majority, 99% of our clients using Greentree will be aware of this module. But I'd just like to talk through a couple of the features just to make sure everyone's aware, not only the more obvious options, but potentially some of the less obvious ones that people may not have been aware of because maybe they've stepped into the role after someone may have left and weren't there for the official training and missed a couple of steps along the way. It's quite a common thing that happens. So if I hit login, it is respecting my Greentree security. So if I don't have access to the general ledger, I'm not going to be able to view financial reports, which is the example I'm going to be using now. So the module name is called Free. It stands for Financial Reporting Engine in Excel. It comes free with the system. It is not something you have to actually purchase. So every Greentree system has it. So if I go in and just open, let's go to an example spreadsheet. Let's go with the profit and loss. As I was saying, it's a live link with Greentree, so it's going to do a quick refresh of Greentree data. Now I've gone and picked one that's got a fair bit in it, just to give you an idea of how quick it can load, and it all depends on obviously the settings that we've got within your system. But this is using those same account names that you were looking at previously, but it's Greentree functions within the Excel spreadsheet. As I change the dates, those numbers are updating live. So you set that spreadsheet up once and away you go. And as I said, most of our finance users would be well aware of this feature. One of the things that a number of our clients are less aware about as time goes on is a couple of little more specific features that are available within here. One is the drill down capability. One is how this impacts your licensing. So to access the financial reports within Excel, you need to have a Greentree user. but you only take up a license in the license count when you specifically are logged in to the Greentree Windows client. So I can view my Excel reports without taking up a seat in my licenses. I only take up a seat if I need to do things like drilling down. So if I look at that $106,500 and go, well, that's a little high or a little low, or I just need to know more about it, I can right click, select GL drill down. It's going to launch my Greentree and show me all the GL accounts that make up that figure, which in this case there was 3. I can then hit view transactions, see each individual transaction that makes up the figure, and keep drilling as far down as I have access to go. And as I said, I'm only taking up a license if I really need that specific feature. So we do have a number of clients out there that may have some managers that need access to some of these reports, but don't need that drill down capability. And as a result, they're not taking up a seat in the Greentree system. The other area that we find quite a useful tool is rather than having every single possible combination of segments, so there's branches and departments I was using as an example before, as tabs on my sheet, which can sometimes slow down your reports, having it as a drop-down box. So these Excel functions do have the option of pointing to those trees within Greentree rather than specific accounts. They also have the option of having a search mask. So as I select Brisbane, you'll notice it's only including accounts where the first segment was 10. So rather than have a Brisbane, a Sydney, and a Melbourne tab, and then when I create Perth or Adelaide and so on, having to create additional tabs on my reports, that's where we can start using things like drop downs to really make this reporting suite a much more efficient process. So that's the Excel add-in that, as I said, comes out of the box with Greentree. Another area within Greentree that you can show financial information is on your workflow desktops. Now, it's a high level look at things. It's not a detailed profit and loss balance sheet type report, but if I was to look at a more finance focused desktop, you do have the ability of showing financial totals. So that could be things like your AP and AR outstanding. You can show any group of GL accounts using the tree feature within Greentree. So I'm showing my sales accounts, and I'm also showing my cost of sales accounts, both month to date and year to date, on my workflow desktop. As I said, any group of accounts you'd like can show up there. Those could be clearing accounts or reconciliation accounts that you're using, tying back to the previous segment we looked at. So if you do have accounts that you're looking after to make sure that they're reconciled on a regular basis or should be cleared out every month through some sort of clearing, then you'll notice if there's any transactions in those accounts by using a feature like this. You've also got the Reports and Documents module. So the Reports and Documents module can be used for doing financial-based reports, both within Greentree, the Windows desktop, as well as via the web view or browser reporting option. So I'm going to show initially just through the Windows desktop. So a number of our clients that might be less Excel savvy or just not want to do their reports in Excel might go down this path as one of their options. So if I look at my financial reporting area here and go have a look at pretty much that same report I just ran within Excel, a bit of a month to date, year to date with budget variances, I can show that within Greentree. One of the things that it can do with the reports and documents is keep a history and the actual end results, or summarized results, I should say, for a given financial report. So here I can see this was previously run earlier. Do I want to use the results that I used back then, which could be potentially a quicker report? So if I am looking at a report from, for historical reasons, and I know no new transactions have been created, then I could hit that yes and just use that previous one. I'm going to hit no for the moment because potentially I've created a new transaction since then. So that comes in. Now I can then expand on that. And once again, you'll see those 3 GL accounts that were sitting on that hardware income tree branch. for that given period. Much like that kind of drop-down option that I had within the Excel add-in example, you can create what we call branch security. So if I was to say I'm only interested in Division 1, then only the Brisbane accounts would have shown up. The additional option here is you can put in not just a drop-down box to limit what shows up in any given selection, but also who has access to any given selection. So you might have one report you give access to everyone who has access to the profit and loss, but using that branch security, you can limit which transactions, or more specifically, which accounts are included. Now this still has the option of drilling down, so I can come in and say, well, let's go have a look at that $106,000, and it's going to take me to the same section I was in before. So show me the accounts, show me the transactions. The exact same drill down screen we got to from Excel. Another option you've got is to right click on these numbers and hit add or view notes. So you could do commentary on here, and that will keep it stored against that specific field and that specific period the report was run for. So I can come in here and say maybe it's to do with a budget variance or some other level of detail. Here is some new notes. That'll keep track of who created the notes and when, and then potentially when someone else runs this report, they'll see that information. You can email this out. You can save it as an Excel file. You can save it as a PDF, or you can save it as what's referred to as a published report, which I'll be getting to as another option yet again that becomes available to you within the Reports and Documents module. Now, if I'm someone that, once again, doesn't need to be in Greentree itself on a day-to-day basis, but maybe I'm just after some financial reports, this Reports and Documents module does have a browser login. So I can come in to a WebView portal and log in. Now, I'm going to specifically focus on the finance component of this, this tool, because obviously that's what today's webinar is about, but it can be used to show non-financial information as well, as you can see by my little desktop that I've got when I open up to do with things like approvals and whatnot. If I come into General Ledger and have a look at my reports, here's that same list that I had before, and I'm going to look at that month-to-date, year-to-date variance option. And let's go and run that. You'll notice it's giving me that same message, but I'm going to hit no yet again. So it's going to go run that report. So this is talking with Greentree, and as I said, it's doing its little poll to go get those numbers. And I can then expand on that as I need to. You can export to PDF, you can export to Excel, and depending on highlighting rules, we can potentially highlight fields if need be to show that there are some notes. So I can see there's some notes that were left by the super user. Once again, being able to import to Excel or PDF directly from here. So if I go and show I want to export in a detailed fashion and hit export to PDF, that's going to go and generate that PDF in whatever format I've allowed it to be exported in. And you've got quite a lot of flexibility on how you set that up. Now, I said I was going to come back to that published reports concept. So this is really quite a handy tool to then still be able to drill into at least some level of detail. So let's go have a look at that account and see the transactions that make up those numbers. Just like I drilled down before, you can drill down as far as you've set up pages within WebView to do so, assuming you've got the WebView Designer module turned on as well. But potentially you've got users that don't even need to go that far. So this is why I was saying a little earlier, we have a number of options depending on what your requirements are. Now, if you've got people that are very hands-on, then Reports and Documents within the Windows client is a great tool to allow you to really drill down, view attachments, view the details, and if I've got the access, change them or update them or do whatever it is I need to do. Through to someone who may just want to view the reports and maybe even a level of detail from a drill down capability. Through to someone who just wants a PDF of the report. They don't need any of this drill down capability. If they've got any questions, they're going to put them back to finance. And that's where that Reports and Documents published reports option can really become handy. Now you can still access that through the web view, the login, but once again, I'm just trying to give you a number of options here for today's webinar. We can also access them through the browser login, which for those that have things like HR mobile, maybe sales mobile, service mobile, this creates a reports or potentially even library badge on our workspace within our browser login. So if I come in and have a look, I can see I've got a number of financial reports. In this example, they're balance sheets, and I can see which ones I've read or haven't read. I haven't read this last one. I can click on that and hit download. Now that could be an image, it could be a PDF, depending on what I need. I'm just going to give you a couple more examples while I'm at it. You can also have a more traditional library, so maybe policies and procedures. And then you can right click or click on that and hit download. So as I said, it could be PDFs, could be Word documents, could be spreadsheets or images, and you can then drill down on those and view whatever it is that you're interested in. So that is the reports and documents module at a fairly high level. And if you do need a more tailored demonstration to look at how that might relate to your business, once again, get in contact with your primary consultant and ask them the real nitty-gritty details, and they can get me involved if required for a more detailed demonstration, or quite often they'll be able to handle that themselves. The last reporting option that I'd like to go through is the Greentree IQ powered by ClickSense option. You can also use the Greentree IQ powered by ClickView, but I'm going to go through the ClickSense option as the example today. So we've done a previous session on BI, so I'm not going to go into the ins and outs of what the business intelligence tool is all about. If you are interested in that, as Norman said a little earlier, we do have a library of webinars that we've done in the past, and I'd strongly recommend heading back and checking on that one in a bit more detail. But the reason why I'm going down the Greentree IQ powered by ClickSense option is because that is the tool or the business intelligence tool that allows us to show dashboard style reporting within a workflow desktop. Now I've gone and set up a bit of a mini P&L on the right hand side, you can see there, and I've got some KPI style gauges and numbers on the left hand side. So I'm seeing my income and cost of sales, my net profit and my gross profit, all month to date. I can also see those in a gauge format instead. And you'll notice that I'm seeing the gross profit split by branch. So my demonstration system looks like Brisbane's doing the bulk of the heavy lifting. So of my gross profit, I can see that Brisbane's 45-ish% and $90,000. Now I can make selections on the chart, or I can create filters to do extra level of detail. So I can see Brisbane was doing the bulk of the heavy lifting. So if I click on Brisbane, obviously they're now the full set of that pie chart, but I can see their specific gauges, their specific income and cost of sales and whatnot, and their specific profit and loss. And as I expand on any of these, you'll notice that I'm only seeing their account. And if I was to take that branch away, I can see there's those 3 GL accounts that we were looking at previously. So being able to show a true KPI style dashboard within a workflow desktop with graphs, bells and whistles, and still potentially a level of drill down depending on how far you'd like to go. So this is a more high level view, but if I wanted to look at, for example, months across the page, I can come in and have a look at that same list of accounts, and now I'm seeing in this example, the year to date by month, so July to May. But if I was only interested in, if I wasn't interested in May, or even if I clear that out and go, well, I'm only interested in July to September, then I'm now heavily reducing that and it's only seeing the first quarter of the financial year. Okay, so I think we'll open that up to questions now. So if you do have any questions, feel free to type them up and put them in the questions box in the GoToWebinar, and I will do my best to answer them as we go.
Okay, no questions so far. So obviously you've done a good job.
So one of the things I did mention earlier is a number of the modules. So the GL allocations feature does work with quad accounting, so it is quite a good tool to implement for those that do have the quad accounting module that might have specific splits on how they wish to do their reporting.
Okay, we have a question now. How do we get hold of the reports and docs module?
So your best bet is to get in contact with your primary consultant and have a bit of a detailed conversation with them about what your requirements might be. So things like number of users, what level of detail they're after. We have a number of clients who've gone down the path where they just want to schedule emails for reports out. So it's really about knowing how you wish to use the module, and then we can provide you with a quote on how many licenses you might need for that.
Delina, nice to hear that it sounds like a lifesaver. Yeah, that's good. Nice to hear. Any more questions? Okay.
So regarding the finance ClickSense model that we set up, for those that are familiar with the BI space, it does allow you to do a snapshot of not only Greentree data but also non-Greentree data. So if you are integrating with third-party products that have some level of data connection, we can show some of that information on those reports as well. And the ClickSense model that we've got set up for today's demonstration is one that will work on other systems as well, with a little bit of tweaking to massage those the trees to your requirements.
Okay, we have another question. Where was the P&L month-to-date, year-to-date variance report?
So I did that through the Reports and Documents module. So the Reports and Documents module is not a set of or a library of reports. It is more focused around, it's a reporting tool. So it'd be a tool that would train someone at your organization on how to use, or alternatively, if you would like to start to develop reports, we can develop them on your behalf.
Okay. Next question. We've not had any improvements for years. Who can help us with an up-to-date Greentree? I would talk to your primary consultant as your first step. If not, ring through and talk to the office, and we can guide you from there. Next question. Is it easy to set up the drop-down box in Excel add-in?
It sure is. Yep. So it just comes down to how you want to do your setup, but it's about updating your reports to add in that search field I was talking about before, and then deciding what that drop-down box is looking at. So it is a quite easy process to set up.
Okay. Next question. Where does the GL Validations section sit in the menu screen?
Sure. So as I said before, that can be found through one of two areas. I did use the favorites to make today's demonstration a little quicker, but if I do have a look at my General Ledger module, system module area, there's a GL validation sitting under that quad accounting module, or if you have the approvals and alerts module, it's sitting there as well. So the same four module options sit there as well.
Okay. Any more questions before we call it a day? Is ClickTest an additional module?
So ClickSense is an additional module. It's powered by we often sell it as a module called Greentree IQ, powered by ClickSense. And so yes, that would be one that you can discuss with your primary consultant about, once again, how many potential users you might need and how that might come into play.
Can the GL validations be used to change branch numbers for profit? centres?
Can it be used to change branch numbers for profit centres? I might need to think that one through, specifically where your question might be sitting there. It's not really designed to change the profit center setup. So if you've got a branch assigned to a profit center, what I'm kind of gathering there, it wouldn't be used to change that. It's really just more about the creation of GL accounts, potentially renaming or reassigning of tree branches and such. Less around, I guess, the profit center itself. We can use it to renumber accounts. So I think it's probably worth having a chat with your lead consultant about that in a bit more detail, because it's probably a lengthier discussion, or not a hugely lengthy discussion, but more so than probably for the question and answer time for today.
Okay. Can you please show me the drop-down box again? Sorry.
Sure. No problems. So what I've got set up is some hidden columns over on the right-hand side. So Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne, and I've got 10, 20, and 30. And so my drop-down box is just a form control. So it's looking at that Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, and has created a cell link which shows down here. So as I make a selection, it's updating that linked cell, and then I've got a little effectively concatenate string that just goes through and adds that field with a dot asterisk at the end. So as I'm changing my branch, that's then updating. Now, from a demonstration perspective, it's a nice, quick, easy setup. I'd probably have that as its own tab or something along those lines, so it's quite easy to add additional names within there. But, at a fairly high level, from a demonstration perspective, when I change branches, if I change it this one to Adelaide, then that's now updated within my drop-down box.
Okay. Next question. What are the main features of the quad accounting module?
So the quad accounting module is used where you have, or primarily used where you have multiple entities that are relatively well linked. So they may be sharing resources, the same list of suppliers, maybe same list of customers, and have a number of intercompany transactions. So that might be some of our clients that are in more of the project sector may have a number of different entities where they share resources depending on what's required for any given project. So basically, an employee can simply be used on a project, so using things like timesheets as an example. And if that's a project that doesn't belong to their entity, then it will do an intercompany loan transaction for you. So the main features are managing intercompany loan transactions automatically for you, but it relates to every module within Greentree that hits the general ledger. So if you're a distribution environment and one company owns inventory and another company is low and uses that inventory to sell or use, then once again, that can do intercompany loan transactions. So it's not really focused on any one particular industry or vertical. It can be used across all. So if it is something you're interested in having a look at, once again, feel free to get in contact with your lead consultant, or potentially we could look at doing quad accounting in a lot more detail in a later webinar.
Yep, no, that's a good idea. I'll put it on my list. Okay, no more questions up at the moment, so I think we'll call it a day. There were a couple of interesting questions in there. We will get a copy of those, so we will be looking at those. And I think someone was asking about getting access to some of the information. I might see if I can arrange for your primary consultant to give you a call on that matter over the next couple of days. So once again, thank you for attending today's webinar. A copy of the webinar will be sent to you within the next 24 hours. If you miss that, then it will be posted on our website and our YouTube page within probably the next week. So once again, thanks a lot, have a great day and keep using Greentree.
Thanks all.